Okay, fantastic. Well, everybody, welcome to the August 5th meeting of the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee. We're going to have a slightly different order of the agenda today. We actually have some terrific speakers here that we're very honored to have. We have council members Helen Rosenthal and Ben Kalos are here. Ben is the chair of the Governmental Operations Committee of the City Council, and Helen is the chair of the Contracts Committee. So welcome. Thank you for making the time to be here. Because of their schedules, we're going to allow them to go first, and please invite you to begin.
Sure. Do I press any buttons here?
Or? No, you're live.
As long as
the screen is live.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us here today. I really appreciate your considering what we want to talk about today, which is a City Council resolution, and taking the time and letting us start and shooting B-roll, and for everyone here, it's all really, really good. I especially want to thank Onita Coward-Mayers, who's the Director of Voter Assistance, for inviting me. We've really enjoyed working with you. My staff is here, Elizabeth Newcomer and Abed Tagani. They've both been instrumental in moving the ball forward here. So thank you. It's been such a pleasure, and we look forward to continuing working together. And I also want to thank the committee for the critical work that you do to expand voter access and participation among all New Yorkers, particularly underrepresented voters. So thanks to my colleagues, Councilmember Kalos, who is here, and Councilmember Mark Levine, who couldn't come today, but they are co-sponsoring this legislation with me. We're here tonight to talk about one of the City Council's efforts to engage some of the underrepresented voters in New York, which is high school students. And specifically, we're asking for your support for our resolution number 281 to establish a Student Voter Registration Day, or SVRD, as we like to say in our office. We're asking your committee to consider supporting the Voter Assistance Unit in continuing their work with us on the Student Voter Registration Day. I'm going to get into a little bit more of the details, but for now I want to let Councilmember Kalos mention a few things while I discreetly take a phone call out in the hallway.
Thank you, Chair Art Chang, John Avalon, Anthony Casino, Joan Gibb, Virginia Wong, and Amy Loprest, Public Advocate James, as represented by the ever capable Umair Khan, as well as Director Onita Coward-Myers. Thank you so much for your work to improve democracy. As an election lawyer and chair of the Governmental Operations Committee with oversight responsibility for Board of Elections and Campaign Finance Board of this committee, it's an honor to be here. For those of you watching on the simulcast, you can tweet me at Ben Kalos, BenKallos, and I'm listening. The Young Adult Voter Registration Act requires the Department of Education that shall provide applications for registration and enrollment and may assist in the execution of such applications, and shall deliver such voter registration form to each graduating student at the same time in the same manner as it delivers diplomas to each student. This is already the law. Earlier this year, I joined Councilmember Danny Drum, chair of the Education Committee, in calling on the Department of Education to not only fully comply with the VAAC, but to implement a citywide senior voter registration pilot. Following our advocacy, 100,000 voter registration forms were picked up by the Department of Education, and the Board of Elections has agreed that moving forward, they will put a tracking number on these voter registration cards so that as they are mailed back in, we'll be able to track compliance with YAVRA. According to the school's demographic and accountability snapshot for school year 2013-2014, there are 73,790 high school seniors. If they were all registered, along with their soon-to-be graduating peers, 327,537 public school graduates will be eligible to vote in 2017, the next municipal election. By 2021, public school graduates eligible to vote would grow to 630,166, which would mean nearly as many 18 to 26-year-old public school graduates would be eligible to vote as voted for mayor in 2013. In order to fully expand registration of our public students, proud to join Councilmember Helen Rosenthal as a co-prime sponsor of her resolution 281 calling for an annual student voter registration day coupled with civic education and registration drives. I look forward to hearing this resolution in the Governmental Operations Committee and to working with this committee, advocates in this room and watching online, as well as schools throughout my district and the city to get every student registered to vote before they graduate. My legislative director, Paul Westrick, is here today and will remain to answer questions. And if you could please excuse me, I'm participating in our National Night Out Against Crime and events throughout my district. So thank you, and we do hope to have your support.
Thank you, Councilmember.
You got it?
Thank you.
I will go fetch my counterpart.
Goodness, now if I say the same thing you did, I'm in trouble.
Now, I want to also, just as a note, and while Councilman Rosenthal gets settled, just to acknowledge Tony Casino, who has been really, really active on this as well. We're very closely with Anita, so Tony, in your absence, want to thank you. Councilmember, any further comments?
Thank you, I am. So, at the risk of repeating what my colleague said, the reason that we're pursuing this is because citywide there are more than 130,000 students in grades 11 and 12 who are or may turn 17 or 18 during the course of any given school year, and therefore are eligible to pre-register or register to vote. But unfortunately, many of those eligible young voters do not register, and I have to say that in my touring of high schools, what I've heard from the students when I've talked to larger groups and trying to get them to register to vote is that their vote just doesn't make a difference, and why should they do that? In truth, I heard that more pre-Obama, like just after Gore lost to Bush. But I think in as much as Obama did raise the fervor, I think that students still don't grasp the largeness, being able to see outside of themselves, to understand the importance of registering to vote. Specifically, the resolution that we've submitted will establish Student Voter Registration Day in New York City to be observed annually on the third Friday of March, on or near Democracy Day, the day that 18-year-olds won the right to vote. So I passed around, and you should have in front of you a copy of our resolution. We basically, the resolution will do four things. It calls on New York City schools to observe Student Voter Registration Day with voter and civic educational activities, discussion, and voter registration availability for eligible 17 and 18-year-olds. The resolution also calls on the mayor to issue an executive order requiring public schools in New York City to observe Student Voter Registration Day. The legislation is designed with the City Council calling on New York City schools to observe Student Voter Registration Day and calling on the mayor to require the public schools to do that, really because we have limited jurisdiction over what the mayor does within government. We can't tell him what to do, but we can certainly pass a resolution strongly encouraging him to do this. And by passing this resolution, with the vote of the City Council and then passing this into law, he's the one who signs it. So I think it'll increase the awareness of this need. I think it'll help sort of pull him into the fray and excitement about Student Voter Registration Day. And then the fourth thing will, of course, accompany the resolution with a letter from the council to Chancellor Farina, asking for her support, encouraging her schools to be to engage in this and participate fully. So, do you want me to go through the work that we've done so far, or are you up to date on that?
I think you should.
Okay. Let me talk to you about the work my staff has done so far. We've had the pleasure of meeting with Onita and committee member Anthony Perez-Casino to discuss Student Voter Registration Day and working together what the effort might specifically look like. We've talked about, in general, not only having voter registration on site at the school, but quality time in the classrooms with students, and then opt-in curriculum that you guys would work on for the social studies and the other teachers to adopt for the day, which we really count on your expertise for. You know, it could get kind of festive, and we could, you know, with New York City leading the way, as usual, and as we would like, we could eventually work this into a national Student Voter Registration Day, which would be incredibly exciting. And I think, you know, the truth of the matter is, you know, as I talk to the principals in my district, they are so burdened by all the different regulations they have to follow. By having your, you know, sort of the council enthusiasm, your enthusiasm, and help with the curriculum, it'll help make it a reality. I mean, I can really see on our side between council members Kalos and Levine and I going around to our colleagues, which we've done on a variety of things already, and saying, you know, would you every year commit to going into a different high school on Student Voter Registration Day and meeting with the kids. It gives it that level of additional attention. So in closing, I'm really hoping, you know, feel free to share your ideas, give us feedback if there are tweaks or serious, deathly edits you'd like to make. Let us know. We've tried to research it pretty carefully, but we would love your support of this resolution. I think it'll carry a lot of weight with the Speaker of the City Council and with our colleagues as Ben moves, as Ben Kalos moves us through what will probably be his committee.
Perfect. So you spoke about a curriculum.
Yeah.
Are you developing a curriculum, or are you expecting the DOE to
I'm actually looking to you guys for your help with the curriculum. My office does not have this expertise. So,
How extensive do you imagine the curriculum
do you want to take this a little bit, Anita?
Well, the conversations that we've had so far are really just, and I have to also mention Cheyenne Sapp, our youth voter coordinator, has been part of this. Yes.
It's so important.
Yes, absolutely, and she needs to be leading this effort. But what we've been talking about is a one-day curriculum and something that could be handed off to the schools. And we are looking for real buy-in from the council because they're in every district, right?
Yeah.
So at least if we had one school in every district participating in Student Voter Registration Day, then they would also be there, and we could train teachers in advance for this one-day, with this one-day curriculum. So that's part of what we're looking at, and we've started the conversations with Anthony Casino, so we're still kind of going through it, but we wanted to know if this is something we want to work on together.
And we would be counting on your ideas.
And kind of modeling in a way after National Voter Registration Day, which we, you know, going into our third term now and starting to have some kind of, we're kind of getting an understanding of how that goes and how to find success in it.
I think it's always the case when you start talking about these things and get the discussion going, you find, unearthed interesting ideas that other people have had. It could be the case that some teachers have a curriculum already, and once we start getting the word out,
Sure.
it'll be less difficult.
Sure.
I think what is really impressive is how much the councilwoman has spent time studying the work that we do. So when she came to us, she had gone through every piece of our annual report and information that we have put out. And, thank you, Beth. And really came with a very thoughtful request.
Right.
So there's a passion in this area to move in this area, and she's looking for a partner
Right.
who can work with her.
We have staff resources to help you.
Well, we would like Cheyenne to help with that, but I am sure we could always use more resources. I think along with this, we have to come up with a budget of what this would look like.
Sure, thank you. So, are there any questions from the committee? Are there any, so we can, the council member move on with their busy schedule. Does anybody in the public have questions, comments, statements they'd like to make?
The date of March. I'm a high school teacher.
Yeah, can you actually just say your name, just say your
You
name?
can come right
Recently
here.
retired, 34 years. My name is James Rodriguez.
Congratulations.
The year has a life of its own, and the election coming so early may be part of the year.
Can you speak into the mic so
Sorry,
that
sure.
we have people with
With
streaming?
the election coming so early in part of the year, November, okay, many high school teachers and social studies teachers, okay, plan their year accordingly. Okay, American history for juniors, participation in government for seniors, which I think is a target population. I've never been a fan of one-shot deals, and March is understandable in terms of the time frame that you're looking at the 2017 election. However, how many of the numbers that you quoted will go under the table and not register to vote this year if we don't catch them for this year's election?
Oh, wow.
And given the fact that senior year is a rite of passage, a milestone in their lives, catching them in the spring semester of their senior year, for those who are going to register to vote, traditionally we're talking about graduating seniors, those who are of age.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better to get them earlier in the school year as they begin to meet with their, not only participation in government teachers, but with their senior advisors, who generally, having been a senior advisor and an activities coordinator for 30 years, generally, one of the plans is to have every student walk away not only with a high school diploma, but with a voter registration card in their hands. Getting them to so late in the school year, I think would be better served, and I'm not asking you to change this, but I think would be better served if you targeted population early in the school year. So according to the curriculum that is already in existence, the teachers are planning their curriculum around, many of them, particularly participation in government teachers, around election day. And there are opportunities, for instance, on election day and leading up to it. In my presentation, I have a document here that I would like to share with everyone. I don't know if I can do it right now, but I will if you tell me I can.
You can.
Beth, can I ask you to join me?
Yeah, I was just
Because
gonna
I
say,
know
Beth,
you've thought about
And
this a lot.
Cheyenne, can you come up also?
We spoke today.
And I would just also say that Mr. Rodriguez he's at Lehman High School.
Oh, great.
And has partnered with us, and we have leaned on him a lot, so.
Got
Well, today
it.
I've come to lean back. The document I'm passing around today is a press release for the National Student Parent Mock Election, which will take place on October 30th. Along with my colleagues in the Department of Education, we have in years past coordinated this activity whereby students will vote through a mock election around the week of preceding the November election. Okay, so the National Student Parent Mock Election will take place on October 30th, and I've come here today to, number one, support your cause. Because I've always said, in so many years in high school, man, what would happen if the high school students in this city ever mobilized? They could sway an election, easily. giving voter apathy and the sentiment that maybe my vote doesn't count, my 1 foot in the sand, it doesn't make a difference. However, as teachers, what we want to encourage students that their voice counts. And conducting the National Student Parent Mock Election, or else our version of it, is a vehicle that is already in existence. It has a well-defined curriculum that is available, and this will be disseminated not only through the Department of Education, vis-a-vis my sending out emails and calling for coordinators, which is what we're doing right now. We're looking for coordinators in the schools to implement this curriculum and conduct activities. We read thoroughly just some of the numbers that it talks about in terms of the impact that it's going to have in the coming months. This program has been taking place for the last 30 years. Force of Nature named Gloria Kirchner, who's in Arizona, I believe, is the president. And she has been working on this project along with a lot of partners. If you look at the second page and look at the list of partners that are already affiliated, many members of the education, God bless you, as well as in journalism and community-based organizations as well, some with a national focus and some with a local focus. And so what I wanted to do today was to simply come and say, I've worked with Cheyenne Sapp and the Campaign Finance Board, and she comes in and does a remarkable job, whether it's a small classroom or an entire assembly, and my assembly is like 500 or 600 kids, and she takes care of business. She does. The kids love her. Certainly more of that needs to take place. When you talk about budgets, that needs to be funded on another level, I believe. But this particular program is one that is tried and true. It is a best practice. It works. It's been working for 30 years. And this is my calling as a retired individual. What I plan to do is to make sure every school in New York City, public and private, has the information that's available here through local newspapers, newspaper and education programs in particular. The Daily News, I have a close affiliation with for many, many years, as well as the other periodicals. And through the Department of Education and United Federation of Teachers, as a retired member, you know, I think that it's critical that we bring a program that is sustainable, that teachers can adopt, as opposed to a one-day thing. And I understand the whole idea of one-day things. I've never liked them, because I think it's a continuum of effort. But leading up to that one day, if you build a groundswell and a mindset and a culture in the high school, you have a greater chance of success, as opposed to, okay, all the schools report how many kids have filled out a voter registration form. Did it actually get to the Board of Elections?
Mr. Levine, thank you very much. Is there more you want to add?
No, I think I'm done.
Great, thank you so
My
much
pleasure.
for coming up and
My
presenting.
pleasure.
Is there anyone else you'd like to come up and make a
No, I don't want to come up, but I would like to comment from here, is that okay?
can stand up.
We need a,
I don't want to
Because
go.
we're also video streaming, so the outside world will not hear you.
Okay, I didn't come prepared to testify or comment, but I'm very happy to hear that something is actually taking place in terms of involving students and helping them to exercise their democratic rights. My name is Karen, last name L-O-W. I am currently an assistant principal of a high school in Pacific. And I will concur with, I'm sorry, I don't know the name, that there is already an existing curriculum called Participation in Government that is required by New York State Department of Education as part of the graduation requirement for all high school students. Now, the only thing is that with that curriculum is depending on the effort of individual teachers, it's not a collective effort to really help students to actualize their democratic rights through the course of learning from the teachers in this particular curriculum. So this particular venture that the council people are sponsoring or trying to sponsor is actually helping students to actualize what is being taught in the classrooms. I don't think as educators we want students to only learn facts and information through rote memorization, but actually through implementation and practice. And I think this is a great avenue for them to actually exercise their right. It's the first step toward becoming, well, as an educator, we want to grow productive citizens. And this is the first step for high school students, especially in many of the underserved communities where our public high school students are coming from, where they can exercise their right and learn to participate in the democratic process. So I wholeheartedly support this venture as an individual, and if I could in any way help, I'd be more than happy to help. But I also want to mention that students want to exercise and want their voices to be heard. And I know that in many different districts and in the many different networks, there are actually independent movement going on. One of the things that actually is going on in one of the network in District 2 is called a Student Voice Collaborative, where they bring high school students together to actually hear what they feel is topical and important. So I think one of the things that we may want to do in order to create a mass movement from the grassroots is really to, like Jane said, to get in touch with every school through various avenues, not just the school-based, but also through the network, because I know there are people who want the kids to be involved. And I think one of the things that James mentioned too is that although it's not a concerted collective effort, but individual teachers have for years preparing students for election day. And the UFT is another organization that we need to get in touch with, because teachers are the ones who are actually working with students. They are the ones who actually have turned me on to politics when I was in high school. And so I think one of the people that we need to, one of the groups that we need to get in touch with, we really want to create a mass movement, a super culture that can sweep up the kids. It's the UFT. Teachers are very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah, I can speak to the question about the date. That we talked about this a lot, about if we wanted to have it, in the fall or in the spring, and we settled on Democracy Day, which is in March, and then we decided to have it on the third Friday in March, so it doesn't ever fall on a weekend. But we decided to do that because, one, we would get more students who are eligible to register. So if the students obviously are coming in either as 16 or 17-year-olds and leaving at the end of the year as 17 or 18-year-olds. And so that way we would reach more eligible students by putting it later in the year. And then the other piece was that then we would also reach students, well before the, deadline for the next election. So we would absolutely get them, because if you go into the winter, obviously then you're missing that, potentially missing the cutoff for the election. So, I mean, certainly these are questions that came up, and we thought that March, early in the spring would be better for those reasons. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly.
Well, thank you, Beth. And really, I just wanted to say with that, it leads into what the Department of Education then does as part of Local Law 34, which is to make sure they distribute the voter registration forms. And I know they weren't able to join us today. They wanted to be here, but Cheyenne has a small report from them that maybe she could share now.
And actually, I can tell you a little bit about that since we partner with them. There is no perfect time of year to do anything with respect to elections, because I think there is still a misconception out there that elections only occur on a Tuesday in November. But the fact of the matter is, we just had an election on June 24th for a federal primary. We have another one coming up in September, and we have another one coming up in November after that. So the dates are kind of arbitrary, which is why I'd like to piggyback on what you said, James, and actually this local law, having it go on an ongoing basis is much better than a big dump. Because I got to tell you, we had 100,000 voter registration forms that we printed up and distributed to the Department of Education within the last couple of months. So they get the forms, but then I think it gets back to a lot of the conversations that Art and I have had. We're giving paper forms to kids that don't want to write. And I don't mean that they don't want to write, verse. I mean, they don't want to write with a pen, because they want to write with their thumbs and they want to write with their fingers, right? I mean, so we're already behind the curve in what we need to do to be attractive to the students. So part of that means that we have to get more with it and more modern. One of the things that we've done, separate and apart from the Department of Education, but in advance of this cause, is I took over as the Executive Director of the Board of Elections last August, the 26th. March 11th, we cut off receiving paper forms from the Department of Motor Vehicles. And now, if you register through the Department of Motor Vehicles, we only get your form electronically, which is a big chunk of where we get our registrants. Now, it's not, in New York City, it's not the only way, but it's not only motor vehicles, drivers, it's also non-driver identification cards as well do the same thing. So that's a big step forward, but we need to really beef up the communication back and forth between the Board of Elections and the other city agencies that are subject to, what was it, was local law 29, what is it now? Was it, it's,
34 for the
no,
or local law 29.
1057A of the city charter, which requires the city agencies, you know, so of which the Department of Education would be one of those. And the more that we can do electronically, A, it gets people in, and it's more attractive to them, and we ease the process. And then B, it really makes our record keeping that much better on the back end.
May I ask a question
Please.
about that? So is it that when people are at DMV, there's a screen and they fill out what's on the screen themselves?
Yes, that's my understanding of the way it works. It's the only way we get their forms now. They used to be given a form with their driver application. We don't get that anymore. And
So-
the other piece of it, though, is there's this whole debate, and for those of you who are not familiar with the debate, you're going to hear maybe a phrase for the first time, the wet signature, right? The Department of Motor Vehicles was accepted by all of the stakeholders as being a place that we can rely on the signature because of all of the other stuff that is required for you to get a driver's license. That having been said, I don't know that, and I'm postulating myself, I don't know that that debate was properly focused. Because if I hand any one of you a voter registration form, and you fill out all of the information, you sign it, we accept your signature as your oath. So there's not this whole side-by-side verification process. So I think people got a little spooked with technology, and, you know, to me, a signature is a signature is a signature. Now, what I don't want to see until it's perfected better, like for me, I can't master signing with my finger.
Yes.
My finger signed signature resembles nothing of what my signature is. Now, you hand me a stylus or a pen, I can do it, right? So I think we need to move a little bit slowly, you know, in terms of what we accept and how we capture the signatures, but not quite as slowly as we've been moving up to this point.
So I think we're all in agreement that there needs to be more digitization of this process across the board, and if anyone's been aggressive about it, it's been this committee. And we're constrained by stakeholders and local laws. But I do think James made a good point about keeping in mind the calendar. I hear that was taken into account. But just the natural flow of enthusiasm toward an election. It's going to naturally build in the fall, and there are obviously voter registration deadlines that need to be taken into account. But it is, I think, a point well taken. And generally keeping a culture that emphasizes the importance of voting. And one idea that your predecessor or the other council member mentioned that I think has merit is mailing, however imperfectly, a paper, a registration ballot with a diploma. I mean, I think that has a symmetry to it about, you know, you've graduated. Now it's time to step up and register. Just ways of supplementing, but I think it's a fantastic measure.
And the other piece I did want to mention in terms of cutoff dates, just to show you, you know, you're an educator, you know how compressed your time frame is as you're trying to get the new school year and have all the students be acclimated to what they need to be acclimated to, you know, to start off the year. Our cutoff last year for the general election in order to be able to get into the voter book was October 11th. Right, so, you know, so that's why I said before, there's no one perfect time, which I think continues to buttress your point, which is if you do it on an ongoing basis, A, you're helping us out because we're dealing with less of a crusher volume, you know, perhaps at a critical time, because we're under an obligation, no matter how many voter registration forms we receive, if they get clocked in by a certain date, we have to get those folks into the book. So if we can get our burden spread out throughout the year and make it, done that way, it helps us. But I think, more importantly, it keeps it fresh and it keeps it alive. So it's not like we're only talking about it every March, or I think we sent out the voter reg forms in April, whatever. If you pick one arbitrary date throughout the year, then it seems like it's the only time you talk about it, and it becomes put onto the back burner, where it's part of an ongoing process. You're going to create a conversation amongst the kids as well, because then it becomes, oh, I got my voter registration form this month. I mean, there's going to be folks, young folks, that are into it too. I mean, we can't all assume that everybody's apathetic.
So
Right.
we move this along, move our meeting along. I just wanted to, I think where we are right now, and maybe if I could just sum up where we are, I think there's been some valid tactical questions around the date. And, I think none of us on this table will be experts on what the right date is, and so we leave it to you to figure out what that is. But I think because we have a quorum here, and I think we don't meet again until December, and you're looking for our support,
Yeah.
that I think, what I'd like to see is, are we at a point where we can have a motion to support this resolution?
I just want to double check. I'm a non-voting member of the board, right? Or do I get a vote?
You get to
Oh, I get a vote
You
too?
get to vote.
Okay,
You
it's
get to
because
vote.
we have the franchise.
I'll second.
Well, if I don't vote, you don't vote, right?
No, I don't vote, but you get to vote.
So do we have a,
Can I just make one little comment?
Absolutely.
I know this is all going in the right direction, so I'm really excited, and I appreciate that. But, you have such a valid point, and I really understand this idea that, you're the one doing the curriculum. And it's sort of bizarre that, the city would come out with a statement not taking into consideration your curriculum. Beth and I were just talking maybe of adding some sort of recognition to that in our resolution, and saying, obviously this does not take away from high school teachers having their own curriculum and doing voter registration at other times in the school year. Because you're right, it's really important to acknowledge, you know what you're doing. And I think if we want UFT buy-in, sort of acknowledging, their hard work would be important. So we'll try to work on that.
I mean, the reality is right now you have a draft bill.
Yeah.
And that the reality of the political cycle is that before the council votes on it,
Yes.
there will be inevitable changes to this.
Yes.
And what I'd like to is make a motion among this committee is that we vote to endorse this resolution with the concept of a single student voter registration day. And that we also, as a committee representing the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee, are prepared to do what's necessary to help educate students under the leadership of our staff.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilmember, you have our endorsement.
Woo-hoo! Great, thank you so much.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
And thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. This will help it go a really long way, so thank you very much. Good to see you.
Okay, so moving right along.
Okay.
The first item on our agenda is approval of our minutes from the last committee meeting. We'll have a motion. Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think I have to abstain. I don't believe I was present for this.
You can actually vote on the minutes.
I can vote on the minutes?
Even if you
Okay,
didn't.
I'll vote for the minutes.
Okay. It's good to have a lawyer on this.
And I have Swell in there to tell me if I just said something wrong.
We have a lawyer watching the committee and then a lawyer watching a lawyer. It's fantastic. We're very, very well protected. So I will just give a very, very brief report. We had an open source democracy event that we sponsored on June 4th. Just one thing that was just very notable about this event is that it's the first time that at least in my tenure as a chair of this committee, that we've had representatives from both the city leadership and the Board of Elections and the state Board of Elections in one place with folks representing a small but relatively broad spectrum of technologists working on voter registration, speaking openly about the challenges of implementing technology to advance what we all think is logical and common sense improvements to the voter registration process and the voting process. And it was a great forum for the exchange of information between these representatives of the government and the public, especially the technologists who are in a position to do something. So I want to thank Michael. Thank you so much for participating, and Doug Kellner for participating. And we had a broad coalition as well of the good government groups who also pitched in and helped sponsor. So that was a terrific event, and I think it's archived somewhere.
It was at New York Law School.
At New York Law School.
Right, so
So for
it's
anybody who's
probably
interested,
available.
you can talk to the wonderful communications folks here, and I'm sure we can get you a link. Next on the agenda is, I guess we have also our next committee meeting is not until December. Right. And I also want to point out, as Mike Ryan also implied, we have a primary coming up on September 9th.
yes.
So if you are registered, please vote. And that's the advance before the general election in November. So I'd like to turn it over at this point to Amy Leprest, the Executive Director of the Campaign Finance Board.
So I don't have really much to report on. You saw the Jamaican television station doing a program about corruption prevention initiatives, and they were interested in the work of the Campaign Finance Board for that television program that'll be aired sometime in the fall. We are busy working on our post-election report. The city charter requires after every single election that the board prepare a report that discusses how the campaign finance program and the work of the Campaign Finance Board was done in the previous election, and make recommendations for changes. That report will be distributed to the mayor and the city council as required by law on September 1st. So we are busy finalizing that, and we actually started the 2017 election cycle. Hard to believe. They had the first disclosure statement for the 2017 election on July 15th. 20 candidates submitted disclosure statements for that election cycle, which is about the average that we see in the first disclosure statement for each election year. So we're all excited about starting another election cycle.
Thank you, Amy. Then we have a report from the Director of Voter Assistance, Anita Coward-Mayers, or...
Sure, yes.
Great.
Good evening, everyone. I'll just run through 3 quick items. On Tuesday, May 20th, we held our first Advocacy Day, which we talked about at our meetings before. We were very excited about it. We had about 12 of our partners who got on a bus here together. Some of them are in the room. And we met with 21 elected officials. And the point and the focus of Advocacy Day was really to bring the voice of everyday New Yorkers to Albany. We know that's where a lot of these decisions are made, and we wanted them to know that everyday New Yorkers also have passion that stand behind these bills and legislation that they are creating, developing, and passing. So some of those were early voting, voter registration modernization, improving ballot design, pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, and instant runoff voting. Our hosts, while we were there, were Senator Gianaris, Senator Parker, and Assemblymember Kavanaugh. They have invited us to return again earlier in the cycle, so we hope to make plans to visit in January or February. Next, I talk about we participated with the New York 1 debate for District 13 congressional seat. We were very excited to do that on June 11th. That was also at Lehman. And we, yes, I know.
High school.
But yes, but same here,
Same
campus. We managed their community outreach, all of the invitations, day of logistics, and had a great turnout. We brought in about a little over 400 people for the debate, so we were very pleased to participate in that. The last thing that two last things that I report on is we had a meeting for the interagency groups, the Local Law 29, the 1057. We had 14 agencies who came in on June 3rd into this room, as a matter of fact, and it was a compliance meeting. So some of them, I think, are here today. Any agencies here today? Can I see your hands? Okay, good, there we go. And so it was a very good meeting, and they had lots of questions, and the main outcome of the meeting was that they want to be able to put their version of the voter registration form on their websites. So the forms that are denoted code 9, they felt it would be very helpful if they could put that on their websites. And they have been pretty persistent about that since that meeting. So we're hoping to get that very soon from the Board of Elections. On August 19th, we have another compliance meeting with the community boards. We have 18 community boards already RSVP'd, so we are expecting to have a good meeting with them also. These efforts are led by Stuart Armstrong. And then lastly, our Celebrate Brooklyn. We went to Celebrate Brooklyn in Prospect Park for the 50th anniversary of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964. And they had a performance that was themed, Vote It Ain't Illegal Yet. And we had a good time with them. We had a very good time with them. We went with about 6 or 7 of our partners and had somewhat of a civic row, a civic corridor, and people registered to vote. People found out all about their voting rights. There was a completely voter-themed performance. There was a film. Our youth poet laureate Ramya Ramana performed, and all of the staff was there as well. At this point, we're going to start talking a little bit about National Voter Registration Day, and I'm going to ask if John would lead us off with our messaging for National Voter Registration Day, and then I'll ask Sabrina to give us some logistics.
Well, before we go there, just on the Code 9 issue,
Yes.
can you just elaborate a little bit on that? And I'd like to just sort of have Mike chime in on this as well.
Okay, sure. Well, we can tag team then, Mike.
Go ahead.
So just explain, if you can explain to the public what the Code 9 issue is and where we're
Right.
at with it.
So on each of the voter registration forms, for those that are given to, oh, I'm sorry, this is Commissioner Victor Calise for the Mayor's Office of Disability, and he's here, Mayor, for your report. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
We're going to tie it up real fast and we do good. Okay, sorry. So the real importance of that is tracking. You know, we have a law that says that that agencies are responsible for distributing forms. And for very long, the Board of Elections has been giving out hundreds of thousands of forms, and there's no real sense of what's coming back. The numbers that are coming back are very, very low. So the fact that they're coded is very important, that we can be able to track those. So the agencies are asking, they're saying that when they put the voter registration form up on their website and people are downloading them, these aren't coded. So they don't feel it's a true representation of the work that they're doing because they are not passing on coded forms. They are passing on just a link to the Board of Elections.
Right. That is an issue. Then that's an issue with with the stuff that comes in, because it's showing to us in our system as if you just went onto the Board of Elections website and did a form. Unlike the Department of Motor Vehicle ones that we get, because it's a dedicated process. So that what happens with those is they come into a queue that is a DMV queue, and so we know where they're coming from, and they're much easier to track. So I think the short-term resolution is to make the link available to more places. But I think the more long-term solution has to be direct pipelines. We should be able to do electronic pipelines, directly, coming in and having our IT people interface with, I'm assuming it's folks over at Do It, to do it on a more broader scale. Because we do queues anyway, because the bottom line is nobody's automatically registered, even on an online registration. It still requires, by process, a Democrat and a Republican to verify that the person who's registering should be otherwise registered.
So it sounds like there's actually, just functionally, it's an operational issue.
Right.
Probably somebody, an IT person from, the Campaign Finance Board's team and from your team, you'd have a
Right.
conversation about protocols and process.
Absolutely.
Maybe
And
we
then-
do it as well.
Right,
Yeah.
and ultimately do it as well. And I think what we have here, though, is a willingness from the current administration and also the city council as well. The city council in terms of pressure on the agencies, but I think their need to put pressure on the agency is less than it might have been in the past, and I think there's a more of a willingness, and with change comes change, right? And I think that there's a little bit more of a willingness to make it happen across the board.
Terrific. So Amy, can we assign someone from our team?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, if I understand, the ones that they're distributing that are paper have, I don't know how that is coded with a barcode or something, right?
Yeah, it's coded on the form itself.
So, I
We
mean,
call them code 9s.
Yeah, so in the very short term, have either a link that goes directly to a dedicated page on your, obviously if they go to the general one, it will be the general one, but if there's a link to an electronic version that's only the local law 9 on your website.
The short term is I don't know. The
Or-
short answer is I don't know.
Or
and-
have have an electronic version, a
Right.
scanned version that people could just, put on their own website and then people could download it. But both those things would
Right.
probably
Right.
work out. So,
Yeah.
it's a logistics thing and I think it should be relatively easy
Right.
to figure
And
out.
I'm happy to,
Yeah.
if you need someone to subreference, I'm
Yeah.
happy to
Yeah.
come in and help out.
Seems eminently fixable.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
So we can just move on, and thank you for that, Mike, and thank you, Anita. Because of the scheduling, if you don't mind if we move the National Voter Registration Day discussion? Thank you. I just want to recognize the fact that we have here with us today Commissioner Victor Feliz, who is here at the Mayor's Office of Disabilities. Thank you so much for your time and coming here tonight. And I apologize that we've had to make you wait.
That's okay.
And eroding into your evening plans. But thank you for staying, and in the future, let us know and we can actually accommodate you. So Umair, I hand the reins over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner. 900,000 of our fellow New Yorkers live and work with disabilities. It is vital that not only we understand their voting rights, but that we're also able to exercise those rights. So let me repeat that. It's vital that they not only understand their voting rights, but that they're able to exercise those voting rights. In partnership with the Center for Independence of the Disabled in New York, I believe Monica just left, and the Office of the Public Advocate, we've analyzed and investigated current policies and practices of the City Board of Elections and the New York City Department of Education. The result of these efforts culminates in the report before you titled Improving Voting Access for New Yorkers with Disabilities. I brought a few extra copies that are over there. We've concluded that many accessibility issues remain unresolved due to the lack of specific agreements and standards between the New York City Board of Elections and the Department of Education, thus violating the federal court's order in United Spinal Association versus Board of Elections to bring about necessary improvements. Inadequate signage, non-ADA compliant ramps, narrow doorways, poorly placed voting machines are preventing New Yorkers from accessing voting sites. And all of these are relatively inexpensive to correct. Of roughly 1,400 Board of Elections assigned polling sites in New York City, half of those are DOE schools. Out of those, only 47 schools have received portions of the $1.7 million in federal money through HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, to make constructional changes to conform them to ADA standards. And 31 schools are due to receive funding in the near future. This is not nearly enough. We must work to ensure that these New Yorkers are able to access full voting rights. It is our recommendation that there needs to be better coordination between the Board of Elections and DOE to ensure ADA compliance. The Board of Elections ultimately has the burden to make sure that DOE complies with its instructions for Election Day protocols. Judge Batts, in her decision in United Spinal, found that disabled voters faced pervasive and recurring barriers to access poll sites operated by Board of Elections, and thus ordered a remediation plan that required the Board of Elections to provide ADA coordinators at each polling site during elections, a ruling that is apparently not fully being complied with. In addition, our report recommends a memorandum of understanding between the Board of Elections and the DOE for all designated polling sites. This MOU must ensure accountability, transparency, to eliminate obstacles for voters with disabilities. The MOU must require pathways to be clear of obstructions, ensure access to doors to poll sites being unlocked during polling hours, and require that poll equipment remain in designated spaces for the entire duration of the election day. Additionally, we recommend including increased poll site inspections on election day, expanded training, and more designated ADA coordinators. The franchise is the most fundamental right in our electoral democracy and the primary means by which citizens can prioritize and communicate their concerns to their government. No qualified New Yorker should be turned away from the polls. Implementing these recommendations will strengthen our electoral process to ensure fairness, transparency, and equity for all New Yorkers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any public testimony? I know Monica was going to.
She was going to, and if she had to leave for the commissioners and have support.
Well, not an official testimony,
Right.
but just,
Well, public comment. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me here. Any type of access that people with disabilities can get is a serious concern for my office and especially the administration. We're committed to making and helping people with disabilities gain access to voting, gain access to everything that city services have to. The city has to offer. I know Anita and I have worked closely on lots of different issues concerning getting out the disability vote. We've scheduled some events together. Unfortunately, were canceled during some Sandy issues that we had, and we since then we've been dealing with other issues. Accessibility is a concern. Anita knows that I'm not shy about reaching out to her. I'm letting her know what those concerns are. I will continue to work with her and the Department of Education to find out what we can do to make things more accessible, because it is important for every New Yorker to vote. There are a considerable amount of people with disabilities here in the city, and we want to make sure that their wants and needs are addressed. What we've done and continue to do is every time near voting season's around, we put out Get Out the Disability Vote. And we post that stuff on our website. We make sure it goes to our social media. We will continue to do that. We get it out to most of our constituents that we work with. We get it up at hospitals, and we try to get that the paper trail out there, because we know not everyone has access to the internet. We'll continue to do that, and we'll definitely send the stuff over to the Public Advocate's office as well.
We look forward to partnering with you.
Yeah, we would love to work with you on these issues as well.
And as far as the Board of Elections goes, we already do a lot. These are complex issues, but we need to do more. And the recent appellate Circuit Court of Appeals decision in United Spinal underscores that. And the clock is ticking on all of us. I mean, the clock is ticking on the Board of Elections. It's ticking on all the stakeholders. It's ticking on the City of New York. It's a big problem. And I just wanted everyone to know, tomorrow we are meeting at my request in my office with the New York City Law Department to put the finishing touches on a contract with Evan Terry and Associates. We call it ETA. They were appointed by the court to serve as a consultant in terms of accessibility issues throughout the city. And in my estimation, through no fault of anyone, I just think it's sometimes the complexity of these issues is not always grasped. But up until this point, it's been handled as a regular contract, a regular procurement contract. And I said to the Law Department, and they were receptive, that this cannot be handled as a regular procurement process, because there's nothing regular about it. Every single location comes with its own specific set of challenges. And for example, a thing that came up to me recently, we have our surveyors going out, and they measure and they do the incline and all of those things. And there was a Evan Terry in one of their earliest assessments, because they're just starting now. And they're actually working, to their credit, at risk, because we haven't finalized the contract yet, and they're getting some stuff done for us. There was a location that seemed to meet all the criteria, except, as city buildings often have, they had an air conditioning unit sticking out of a window that really shouldn't have an air conditioning unit there because there's central air and it wasn't working. Well, what they did there was they put one of those steel cages around it, to make sure that it was no problem. And to the layperson, it didn't seem like an issue because it was accessible.
Except for a person who's blind.
Exactly right. And then it came back to the, a member of the blind community might overshoot the doorway and then walk smack dab into this air conditioning unit that's sticking out of a window. So, that taught me a harsh lesson very quickly, that there is no simple answer to these things, because every building, depending on its age, depending on what's been retrofitted into it, brings with it its own set of challenges. We had another building that had a perfect ramp and everything looked great, and then the accessibility entrance had a immovable emulsion going down the middle between the two doors, and it wasn't wide enough. It was barely wide enough. I mean, somebody with some difficulty could get through, but it was barely wide enough. So that's the kind of stuff that's coming for all of us, not only in the Board of Elections, but in accessibility in general. It's coming, and we have to work at it collectively, and we have to tap into all of the resources that are available, because the city's going to have its own problems. And the other thing I want everybody to be aware. The ADA compliance, the buildings that are deemed suitable for other purposes are not deemed suitable for election purposes. There's a stricter standard associated with that. So, for example, we have locations, old age homes, that are technically not, 100% compliant. Now it came out with the second handrail requirement. So if the place was suitable last year and it had, 2 years ago and it had one handrail, now it needs two handrails. So we're constantly working on those things. And the other big thing is to get cooperation from the individual schools. And it's always a handful, but it's not. There are some principals that think that their school is their personal palace. And we have we send out schematics. At agency expense this year, we sent out to every principal and every custodian a packet with the room designation, with the layout. And still we go to some schools occasionally and they have, cafeteria tables piled up in half the room. And when we show up 2 days before Election Day, if we don't get, quick turnaround on that stuff, we end up getting squeezed into a little area, which is uncomfortable for the person without disabilities, but completely unworkable for the person with disabilities, particularly, wheelchair-bound folks, because they need that 5-foot clearance around, around all the equipment so they can. And here's the kicker, right? My mother-in-law was able-bodied for most of her life and ended up suffering an amputation toward the end of her life, coupled with eye issues, all related to diabetes. And as a result, she was very uncomfortable going out of her own home with a prosthetic on because she didn't feel she could see well, and she was, unstable. So she became wheelchair-bound, and that became, all of a sudden, disability visited our family in a way that you weren't ever expecting, right? So we have to do everything that we need to do to make sure that people can, and this is the key to me, independently exercise their right to vote. Independently exercise their right to vote. Not vote. Look, there are some people that have such severe disabilities that they absolutely require assistance, no question. But for those that don't, and can otherwise do it on their own, we have to do it, and it's a collective effort, and it's a big deal. It's a big problem. It's not something that's going to be solved by the Board of Elections or by the mayor's office or by the city council. It's going to take a full court press of everybody working together to make sure it happens.
At some point in your life, you'll either become disabled know someone that's disabled or be temporarily disabled. So it will affect you at some way, shape, or form. But we're committed to working with everybody to see what we can do to come up with solutions to the barriers that exist within our local centers.
I mean, a couple of years ago, and it's, you know, it's another thing too, we don't think about the temporary disabilities.
Right.
A couple of years ago, I ruptured my quadriceps tendon, and I was in an immobilizing brace, straight, for 3 months. And there's a lot of stuff you can't do when you can't walk right.
Sure.
You know,
Take for
and
granted.
absolutely, staircases, I mean, you know, it may as well be it may as well be Mount Everest when you look at it.
I think probably around this table, we have a lot of folks who've had rooms in places. I had 2 hip replacements in the last 7 months.
Welcome to our world.
Thank you. But just, Mike, just one question, a practical question. Do you have somebody in your office who was responsible for ADA?
Yes,
you know, the
John O'Grady,
accessibility?
he's our VEOU, he's a voter equipment guy.
Great.
And we do, and we'll have a better sense, I think, tomorrow, a little bit of how far along this contracting process is going to be advanced. But if the preliminary results of what we're hearing from Evan Terry from a very, very small sampling, there's a lot of issues. You know, and some of them
Absolutely.
seem like small fixes, and I will tell you, one of the challenges that we have, sign placement. Last election, we had a problem with the signs not getting into the envelope. Certain things to get done by a vendor, and the signs didn't get into the envelope. We had to scramble on election day and get ADA compliant signs up. So it's something that seems innocent enough, and you know, when you're dealing with 1,250 locations, if one thing goes wrong, it's a problem. And then, you know, we're relying on poll workers who are not full-time folks. So, like I said, it's
And there are
really
hundreds
a
of
full
sites,
court press.
Hundreds of sites, thousands of workers.
Yeah, I mean,
It's complex.
but that's not by way of excuse, it's just by way of
Absolutely.
explanation. Because it's still our responsibility, you know, irrespective.
And Mike, you've been doing an impressive job moving all of these boulders forward, so thank you for that. And I wanted to just also say that
I have a thick Irish skull.
right now we have a lot of immigrants here, thick skull, you know,
That's
all-
right, I have
a
it.
lot. So, but the thing I think that is unique, and I think this is a great opportunity to have the 3 offices work together. We have the Board of Elections, we have the Mayor's office, we have the Public Advocate's office, all advocating for the same thing. This is a complex issue, so it's going to take all of this attention to make something happen.
And I think, you know, tomorrow, when the law department goes back and they reconnoiter in the deep recesses of this building, they're going to be a little bit more enlightened as to the depth and breadth of this problem. And I'm certain that Mr. Carter and others may have some conversations over at the administration about, you know, it may be a eye-opening experience, and I think it will be.
Thank you.
I-
Sure,
I-
thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Mayor,
you.
thank you, and thank the Public Advocate's Office for all the work on this.
Okay.
So let's go back to the National Voter Registration Day. Apologies again for the interruption.
No,
That was good, thank you.
So, you know, in our initial conversations, we're really just trying to conceptually come up with a message or frame that could work for National Registration Day. So we tried to think about a message that would be urgent, would be nonpartisan, and sort of tap into the current zeitgeist about politics. I think most folks know that, you know, Congress has a 9% approval rating, but a 90% reelection rate. And that's something that's frustrating to a lot of people. And one of the challenges we have with low voter turnout, particularly among youth vote, which is something I'm very concerned about, is engagement, initial engagement and optimism meeting that buzzsaw of a dysfunctional Washington and leading down. So in part of our conversations with Anita, it was what message can really tap into that while being resolutely nonpartisan. And while we don't have a final fixed recommendation for language, I think the message that seemed to work was something along the lines of something simple and straightforward. Don't complain if you don't vote. I mean, if there's one thing as New Yorkers we think is a God-given right, it's to complain. And it's to complain about government, it's to complain about a lot of things. But the reality is if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain because you're not part of the process. And so in our conversations, we thought that message was one that had urgency, it had a certain street smarts, it tapped into where I think the country is right now, as well as our locality. And so a message of that nature, don't complain if you don't vote, seemed to be something that we could perhaps get behind as a committee.
Terrific.
Yeah, and
I love it.
John has helped us in previous years as well with National Voter Registration Day. He's helped us to solidify our celebrity host, which was Rosario Dawson on CNN on one of the morning shows. So he has been committed and kind of watched it over the last couple of years. So we're really hoping to take the stance of centralizing everything. I mean, because we have so many partners and we train and we work with them so much that our partners quickly can outgrow how much we can really do. So we're hoping to be that place that kind of centralizes all the information, promotes it as well, helps to track the information and all the work that they do, and then to get them excited about the work that they do as well. So we think that this message is going to also help with that, and John has graciously also agreed to bring in the Daily Beast as well, the assets of that to help this along and to have it almost a national message. So
I think we can run it certainly an op-ed by someone we discuss. I'm happy to participate personally, certainly.
Thank
So we're
you so
excited
much.
about that. So now the day-to-day logistics stuff, Sabrina's got her hands filled.
Yeah, so on July 29th, we kicked off NVRD with a planning session, and we had various partners here. Some include Catholic Charities, Brooklyn and Queens, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, Dominicanos USA, Headcount, HHC, which is Health and Hospital Corporations, New York Organ Donor Network, NYPIRG, Vote Harlem, Food Bank for New York, League of Women Voters, Cumulus Media, Department of Homeless Services, and some that couldn't make it, like Naleo is a part of it, along with Rock the Vote and Voto Latino, and Hot 97, NAACP, and the list keeps growing. So Mazita wanted to join us as well. So what we did is we did this kickoff meeting. We did a planning session instead of a training session. We really wanted to know what each partner had to bring to the table, and how, in what capacity did they want to participate, and what they were able to do. Some have a very strong social media presence. Some have facilities where they can do voter registration drives. The radio stations want to be part of the events that are going to be happening on that day. 2 confirmed events that are going on National Voter Registration Day, which is on September 23rd, is a voter jam at Washington Square Park, hosted by New York Organ Donor Networks, NYC Votes, and NYU. And the second event that's happening on that day also is called Just Say Yes to Voting. It's at City Hall Park, hosted by League of Women Voters and partners. They have about 7 partners on board along with us. Third event that's brewing but not confirmed yet is at Borough Hall with Brooklyn Borough Hall with Catholic Charities, Brooklyn and Queens, and the NAACP. So what we're really trying to do is solidify and develop our plans for National Voter Registration Day so that we have a very strong day of activities on that day. Last year we registered 1,500 people on one single day through our partners and our activities. So we're really hoping to double that and get more partners involved. So if you have not joined an MVRD partner list, you can find me after the meeting and we can sign you up and start building our plans.
Well, I did participate in that last year. I was not on the job very long, but it was at Bryant Park.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a 19-year-old daughter who is going into her 2nd year in Hofstra University, and very little that I've done in my life has she admitted to being impressed with. And I don't know if that's a statement about me or about her. Maybe it's more about me than it is about her. However, she was impressed about the Bryant Park event because I got a picture with America Ferrera. And my daughter saw my phone and said, "When did you meet America Ferrera? I can't believe you. She's in like my favorite movie she's in." So it's always interesting what's going to impress people or inspire them to do stuff, and sometimes it's the smallest things.
Yeah.
But it was a great event.
To that
Yeah.
point, I wouldn't underestimate the importance of getting a couple of celebrity activists to participate, because that really does increase the radius of accessibility of the message, particularly among young people.
Well, and I observed last year, when in my remarks, how apropos it was to have a young woman named America headlining the, voter registration day. I mean, I just thought it was great. And she's a gracious young woman, but I agree.
Right, what day is it? Can you get the date?
It's on September 23rd, which is Tuesday.
And is there an event, is there a location?
There are 2 locations right now that we have confirmed. Washington Square Park with NYU and New York Oregon Donor Networks and NYC Votes, and Just Say Yes to Voting at City Hall Park, hosted by the League of Women Voters. Celebrities are still to confirm, but it'll probably, America might still be part of it. Rosario Dawson's always a part of National Voter Registration Day. And we have 2 radio stations that are on board, Hot 97 and there's a 103.9, which is a new R&B station, part of Cumulus Media, who
Great.
are going to be participating. And the radio always helps with the DJs and the local celebrities to really make sure that the audience stays excited
And last year, New York City was number 2 in the country, so this year our goal is to have the most registration on that single day, so.
Yeah.
That's
the-
Texas.
the county in Texas.
A county in Texas?
Yeah.
Not by much. We were like, not much. But we gotta step it up.
We have a very impressive,
Yeah, lives in Texas.
Deep in the
voter
heart.
person.
Deep in the heart.
I've met him, but he's very impressive, but, but we're gonna be number 1 this year.
We
There
are
you go.
number 1. So that's why we kicked off our meeting relatively early, to make sure that everybody knows exactly what they're doing on National Voter Registration Day. But we're really going to be looking for everybody's support. So if you haven't signed up to join us, please do so, and you can talk to me after.
And the key with it also is that the last couple of years, people reported their numbers separately. So really what our pitch was is for us to come under the umbrella of NYC Votes to report our numbers together. So our partner, that way, we'll be
crush them.
Yeah.
Right.
Crush them, all right.
Crush them.
I like that, all right, New York number 1. All right.
It's something.
So with 8.5 million
More
people,
than
you
something.
expect to keep counting number 1. So, yes, so
My name is Mizeda Urin. I am from Alliance of South Asian
can you
American
please
Labor.
come up if you're going to make a
Oh.
comment? And
Do you have a comment now, or do you have a public testimony?
We have one more.
I have a question.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Mizeda Urin. I am from Alliance of South Asian American Labor, and we are the fastest growing population in South Asian. And we are the minority to voter registration also. They are not interested to, because you have to educate our people what is important to register the voter. And first we have to educate them why it is important. This should be the school opening day. When the schools open, because September 9, schools is open. That day should be the important for the student who have the high school graduation last year. Has to be important for our. And that should be the day parents, all the parents is come out. And that date should be selected National Voter Registration Day.
Yeah. As far as the date, I do know since it's a national movement, this is the closest date. So every state has like a different deadline. This allows everybody to participate and still the closest to the registration deadlines. And that's why on National Voter Registration Day, that's why it's the 23rd, because it's not just New York, and there are others who are relatively close to the state. So this allows all states to participate in this national program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But
So I think we're not going to change the date.
Yeah, that's
It-
not-
it is-
This is
it
not
a
our
national date,
initiative.
and
We
we
participate
hear,
in it.
we hear your point. But so thank you so much for the question.
Sure, I just wanted to say one point, though. I think it's relevant to the city council's efforts, though, and what our retired teacher, James, was pointing out, is that voter education has not only to do with students, but with parents as well.
That
Maybe
is
this
my
could be-
concern.
This could be a coordinated
Yeah.
effort as
That's
city
my
council
concern.
moves forward, that in addition to getting the children registered as their seniors, to work with the parents who are coming there to get them registered
that
as
is
well.
my concern.
If they're
That is
eligible, right.
I already requested my city council, Ronnie Lansman, District 24, Assembly District 24 also, and they said they will let me know soon which day can be borrowed or district registration. And that was helpful also, you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
We need to communicate that to the council members.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take one more opportunity to drive the point home at the importance of automating the registration process as much as we can. Because while registration drives are great and they need to happen, even this one coming at 9/23, if we go by last year's cutoff date, you know, that leaves us about 2 weeks to collect up all this paper and get everybody into the system. And we do it every year, but we are pushing it right up to the edge, and we're doing a lot of stuff on overtime, so the cost is greater, right? And then, if you got some bleary-eyed folks doing data entry, because we're trying to make a deadline, you get mistakes. So then people are even in the book, and then they're not in the book, and the last thing we want to do is sour people on the process, because they bothered to register, and then they get there, and their name's not spelled right, and there's a confusion, right? So really using the collective effort, everybody's voice needs to be heard about this so that we can automate this process as much as possible. And Art and I have discussed this, like particularly you take Asian names with the reversal of the surname and the given name. That's a ripe area for mistake when, you know, some data entry clerk is you know, working hard to try to get stuff done. Some of the more, I refer to them as culturally complex names. I happen to have a very simple name, Ryan, R-Y-A-N. Never been mispronounced, never been misspelled as far as I know to anybody, you know, but other folks aren't in that, you know, in that same situation. So, you know, folks know their name. They know how it's spelled, and they know what it's supposed to look like. So if we can get people engaged into that process and automate it so that they're doing their own data entry, then we're only doing the verification process at the back end, and it's a big deal. But that's also going to require, you know, funding across the board as well. That's why I hammer it wherever I go, because I need people to complain about it and remind the folks that get to make these decisions, other than us, that we need money. Exactly right.
We need money. The will is there.
Correct.
We need the money.
Absolutely. So I apologize. I'll step down off my soapbox now, but we need money.
I want to verify is same date but different time, or same time in different
Every
two
year?
locations. Yeah.
The two events?
23rd.
Same time.
Same time,
Same
different
day.
locations.
Yeah, different locations, different audiences.
Lunchtime entertainment.
Yep.
Great. Good.
But they'll also be in the trains,
All right.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we have one final item on our agenda before we open up to any other public comment, which has to do with the approval for ethical guidelines. Just for the public consumption, the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee, just like the Campaign Finance Board, is a nonpartisan entity. And every member of the board, actually of both boards, due to our fiduciary obligations, has to sign a document which requires us to disclose any connection with anybody who might, in one way or another, potentially seek to influence our decision through partisanship or through commercial interest. And so we'll call for a vote of the ethical guidelines. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion.
Question?
I had a question, because we haven't had a conversation about this, at least I don't recall there being a conversation. Can there be an explanation as to, can there be an explanation as to how this document was created, and was it replicated, or is it based upon another agency's documents? Just
Okay, so I can tell you a little bit. This document was adopted when we first started the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee. It was adopted by that initial group, and we are asking to re-adopt it because now we have a new complement of members. It's based on the ethical guidelines that the members of the Campaign Finance Board agreed to. That's the basis, although many of those provisions are not appropriate for the group that's here, so some of those, it's a much, watered down is the wrong word, but I mean, it strips out some of the additional provisions that the Campaign Finance Board about giving contributions to, the board members can't give contributions to candidates. They can't sign petitions just to guarantee their objectivity in regulating the campaign finances. Obviously, that's not appropriate for this group. So it really just is to make sure that the members of this committee know and acknowledge that the work that we do is going to be done in a nonpartisan way and requires some disclosure if people have potential conflicts. It's really mostly a disclosure document. It's the only political conduct, unlike the CFB's guidelines that is prohibited, is that no member other than the public advocate, who's obviously an officer, an elected official, cannot serve as an officer of a political party or be a candidate or participate in the campaign of someone who's running for office in the city. And in addition, that no member of the committee shall serve as a candidate or a position of authority in a campaign for any political office. So basically to ensure the objectivity of this group. And then the rest of the provisions are disclosure provisions so that it's full and transparent of what people's possible conflicts in dealing with these voter activities are. And that's the genesis of this, and it really derives mainly from the Campaign Finance Board's ethical guidelines that have been adopted since the board has been in existence since 1988.
Sure. My only other question is, has there been a review so that this is consistent with the Conflict of Interest Board, which is what municipal employees have to submit their documentation for?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, these are in addition, obviously you're still subject as a city employee
Sure.
to the conflicts provisions, but these are in addition, and there's no conflict there. The Conflicts of Interest Board always encourages agencies to go beyond their provisions. So
as
yeah.
applicable to the work that organization is doing.
And I will say, you know, as someone who reports to another board, and also in terms of my own professional sense of ethics, and we always want to make sure you do the right thing, COIB is eminently approachable. If there's anything that anybody has any questions about, you know, that call them ahead of time before you go ahead and do something. They would much rather answer the question proactively than, you know, having to have a conversation with them later on about how much your fine is going to be imposed at what level, right? So they're great. Enforcement counsel, the woman's name is escaping me right now, but you call up there and you ask her any questions, she gets back to you, and she gives you the Hoyle method of taking care of it. And then, you know, for like me, when I have to report back to a board, and I go in front of the board and I say, I spoke to COIB and they said do this, 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 and if you stay within these parameters, everything's good. And it makes everybody happy, and you never have to write a check out of your pocket for something that was an otherwise innocent mistake. So, no advertising for COIB now.
You're marketing for COIB. It's good.
So, Amir, are you prepared to vote on this?
I haven't had I saw this document a while back, and I haven't had a chance to just review it internally. And so I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to look at it.
Do we need all 5 to vote? Okay, so why don't,
It's a fairly short document.
You
but
want
wanted-
to look at the internal in your
Right,
office.
I wanted to look at it internally before we made a commitment to something, just so it's consistent.
Just for clarification, do we need to have an in-person vote to affirm this document, or can we vote by, we can't vote by email or phone?
No.
Okay. Well, in that case, I think we have to we'll postpone this item to the December meeting. And do we have any public comment at this point? Please,
No, I can speak from here.
Okay, it's just a comment. My name is Eleanor De Palma, and I'm with the Department of Transportation, and I direct the Language Access Program at DOT. And we, as a matter of course, our everyday in our operation, we send out voter registration forms whenever someone requests documents, DOT documents. And since we know that there are Spanish, the forms are translated in Spanish, Korean, and Chinese. Oh, and Bengali. Okay, I was going to suggest Bengali. I was not. Isn't it? Yes, I was going to suggest other languages, because language is a barrier. A very significant portion of our New York City population prefers to speak and write in their own language, and it's been documented through the census tract that more than 30% speak English less than very well. So that means they're limited in their language skills. And I think that that's a population we should consider when we talk about providing access. Even those who have a disability, some know only sign language. And also then they were raised in their own country where they were not, if they were born deaf, they were communicating with people who speak another language. So we have two languages to consider for them. And I think it's very important, as I said, because more than 30% of our New Yorkers speak and prefer to speak in other languages and to read other languages, and their skills are less than very well. We know that from the New York City planning demographics. So I was going to recommend the forms be translated in other languages besides the three. Now I know 4.
Or isn't it 7?
So
Isn't
there
it
are.
standard 7?
It's 5. It's English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Bengali.
Department of Education has 7.
We also do some limited stuff on our website in Russian as well. But we're required to do 5. And it always comes back to funding. So this is not a kick the can down the road to make it somebody else's problem. But we're mandated to do 5.
Okay.
So we get funded to do 5.
Okay.
Right? And the other problem that you guys, I'm sure you've seen, was the issue with the font size last election. As long as we have those full-face paper ballots, until technology takes over and we do something different than that, there's always going to be a competition for real estate on the ballot since there's a limited amount of paper. Right? So we have 5. What we did to address that to some extent was in Queens, this coming election for the first time, we're not going to have one ballot style for the entire city. So what's going to happen is you're going to have 5 languages on the ballot only in those areas, those 79 election districts in Queens that require all 5. In the other districts, you're going to have less languages based on our limited English proficiency demographics. And it really comes down to not just the communication level, but it's also the ballot itself is affected by it. And so one of the dangers that we see, and our lawyers are telling us, even though I'm a lawyer, I still have lawyers that we consult with, right, is that when you open that up, do you open up now a requirement to put it also on the ballot?
I see.
And if we put it on the ballot, quite frankly, we don't have the ability to appropriately account for ballots presently if it goes to a second page. So the way the machines are set up and it gets ultimately state certification, if we ran out of room, we had to go to page 2. Leaving the political issue up to the side about who ends up on page 2 and who's upset that they're not on page 1. Let's assume that that's not even a problem, right? But that's a big leap of faith, right? But now we get to page 2. The way the machine counts it counts pages, not ballots. So now if you're a diligent voter and you vote for everybody and you put both your pages in, but I'm a slothy voter and I only want to vote for somebody on page 1, now we have 3 pages when we should have 4. And how do we account for that at the end of the night when we're doing our counts and we're trying to do ballot accountability? So everything, and I'm learning this, believe me, I'm by no means an expert on all of it, but I know enough about it, after a year on the job, that everything that we do touches something else. And it's not from a lack of will, but we have to make sure that we do it, in an orderly fashion. And if set down the road some type of more advanced technology voting is done, then I think that the languages will open up.
You'll have to also have to change the state laws. To,
Right, yeah, it's a big
accommodate
problem.
this.
Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted to also comment, I heard talk about the events coming up to reinforce the importance of voting with all the activities and the performances and the actors and actresses. I think that's very important. I think that people find an attraction when they hear music, when they recognize a celebrity. And the music and the dance and the performance, I think, uplifts people and brings them together. So I think that's a great way to involve, more people into this voter registration process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Well, I was asked or invited when I received
Yeah,
an email from Selena back in June, and that's why I prepared the testimony and I sent. So it's my understanding somehow that this was going to be a part of the conversation. So it's not that my initiative really. I'm with Daniel Linsky. I am president of a Russian organization. Huh?
You can just summarize, that would be great.
Yeah. I will not be reading this whole and but I think it's actually a very good sequel to what was just discussed in terms of language access. About myself, I'm Mitty Daniel Linsky. I'm president of Russian-speaking Community Council of Manhattan and the Bronx, which is a 501c3 nonpartisan organization, working with Russian. Hearing well, working with the Russian immigrant, generally with immigrants from 15 former Soviet countries who are Russian speakers, not Russian category. In Manhattan, this population has been growing compared to other parts of the city where it's bigger, but has been declining or not growing that fast. Basically, I want to say a few words about the major big challenge that is felt by everybody in the community in terms of increasing voter participation and in terms of Russian community involvement in the political process. The voter participation in the community is very low. And there is a sense that even though we have all different views on many issues, there is one general view in the community for one big central reason, which one was mentioned here, language. In fact, there are two communities in the cities that are by American Community Survey have more than half the population not fluent in English, that's Russian and Chinese. And among the elderly population, which is very significant for Russians, this fraction goes up to 90% and higher of people not fluent in English. And this was an issue for the community for a long while. In fact, organizations in South Brooklyn, where most of the Russian community is concentrated, have been working on this and campaigning for changing the situation for a number of years. That's, I must say, while I'm talking about this, is that in the Russian community, unfortunately, we don't have the organizations that would have the funding to afford or to pay the salary of any people doing actual community organizing, advocacy, or civic participation, voter registration. This is all done by volunteers. There are people who paid by other organizations to do some other things, but this is basically, the community is not funded, no organization community is funded to do any of this. For example, my work as a Russian-speaking community council funded is volunteer, even though it has a lot of people involved in this organization, but I'm on the staff of a black organization, the Black Institute, whose president is former ACORN president Bertha Lewis. The black community has taken an interest in what's going on in Russia, for which we are very grateful, and that's a great collaboration for us. My testimony, which is sent in full by email, basically goes through the legal situation, the situation of the legislation on Russian language access as we see it from what we know. We know that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the amendments that specify the language minorities do not include the Russians or East Europeans. There is a requirement of, even for those minorities that are included, to have 5% of the population to actually qualify for the translation of the ballot into their language. But in the Russian community, there was a strong sense that its concentration here in New York City and its language challenges need to be addressed. And there were two bills which I go in more detail in my written testimony. One of which was passed in 2009 and signed into law in 2010. Which, in fact, on the basis of which the material on the Board of Election website is being translated. And this bill included, this amendment in the election law included the requirement to provide the material on the website, the same that is provided in other languages, such as Chinese and Korean and others, and to have a booklet on, have here detail what is included, what are the rules for voter registration, general information, not information about candidates, general standard information for voters that is included. Now, this law kind of was a small step in the right direction, but it was generally a disappointment because most of our people who are challenged with English language are elderly. They don't have, many are poor and have no access to the internet, or use it very, very little. They don't go to the website. This website materials don't reach this population. And as for the booklet, I have kind of been inquiring folks who are interested in this. No one has seen this booklet. You know, I went once and I took a pile of those booklets and distributed it among our people. Generally, people haven't seen this sent around, and they heard from the previous from people from other people at the Board of Elections that it's too costly to print something. So in fact, there was an admission that even this law was not being implemented fully because of the cost reasons. And it was insufficient for the community. There was a large campaign that led to the adoption, to the passing of another bill in both houses in 2012, which was much better, and that basically was made a lot of people happy. That actually, and here I would just give the only quote that I want to give, because basically it said that all information that is provided by such a Board of Election in English about the electoral process, including registration of voting notices, forms, instructions, assistance, as well as information provided at the polling place, including voting systems, ballot marking devices, and ballots in Russian to the extent needed to allow voters who speak Russian to participate effectively in the electoral process and all voting connected activities. So that was a huge deal, but alas, it was vetoed in the fall of 2012. For what we know, it was vetoed on the basis of the information provided by the legal department of the Board of Elections, saying that it's too costly. It's apparently cost $6 million to implement. We in the community, no one knows, no one saw the actual details of where this figure comes from. Well, I don't want to speculate about it. I'm not an accountant. But people would like to see where it comes from and whether there might be some solutions and some kind of compromise solutions that would, we suspect, cost much less and would enable still people to feel that they are they get translation. Those people who actually need it, because in fact, well, even though Russian-speaking community is the third largest in the city with over 200,000 people, maybe by our data about 140, 150,000 voters max. That's the people who would need the ballot, and even among those people, there is a sense that it's not so much a matter that nobody can read the ballot, but as it's a more symbolic issue that in fact it also represents other things that people feel are important for our community, such as representation on the staff of various elected officials, and generally being respected and being equal and being having what other big linguistic minorities have. So, of course, we would very much want to collaborate with, I'm very grateful for the invitation to the dating back to June to speak here. Of course, I was able to hear and learn lots of interesting things which I would like my community, very much would like to get my community involved, but of course the language issue has been so huge, and the disappointment over the veto of that bill was very big. That of course, can't talk to our folks about other things without addressing this problem and looking for some kind of solutions. Now, my written testimony goes into some other suggestions, but I guess I will limit myself to that most important central piece, and of course it would be great to hear whether now or in the near future how we could do something about this problem.
Well, thank you. And so just to, Sabrina, can you circulate that testimony to all of us on the committee so we can read it in full? So one question I have has to do with, obviously, you know, we oversee the elections here in the city, but like, you know, municipal candidates or local candidates or state candidates or federal candidates or all the above? Are you advocating for local, state, federal, all the above?
Are you asking, are we looking for materials to be translated? Yes, of course, all the candidates that are running in New York City where this is a large community.
Yeah, I think Mike did a very good explanation of the challenges involved in bringing yet another language in. But I think, you know, technology certainly can solve and address a lot of these issues. Things like having a Russian-specific ballot, for example, would enable the type size to be bigger and for there to be, you know, multiple languages. But you know, I think there's an interrelationship between the actual technologies, the practices, the laws, and you know, I think, you know, to Mike's prior point, right now I think that, you know, this is all cyclical. Every problem creates another problem, which has another problem and another impediment. And the technical term begins with the word cluster. And the problem we have, and so I think I mean, do we have any advice to give Mr. Glinsky, other than to advocate with the mayor, with the mayor and the governor right now, because this is going to require some, you know, we all want more languages to appear on the ballot.
By the way, if I might say something about this, since you mentioned that, the one last good news that I was able to find about our concern was the letter written by the public advocate Bill de Blasio last year to the Board of Elections, actually siding with the advocates of the bill, actually saying, in fact, yes, I have it here, and the letter that was dated March 6, 2013 from the Public Advocate Office said that urged the Board of Elections to provide in Russian, quote, voting materials, ballots, signs, voter mailings, employee and volunteer training materials and information that are already available in Spanish, Chinese, Bengali, and Korean in various counties. And that, quote, the board is doing a real disservice by excluding Russian from this list. So thank you for mentioning, and indeed, you know, my sense is not only from today's meeting that we are entering some times, you know, times when things that seem to be very complex and leading to many other complications somehow need to be resolved out of the general sense of bringing more equality to various groups in the city and bringing more acceptance and integration to immigrant communities. And for every community there are specific issues that are great concern to them. For the Russians, this has been the unifying kind of topic that is of great sensitivity and that needs to be addressed.
Right. I mean, other than reiterate, you know, some of the things that I had said earlier, I don't know how much more I could add to the discourse tonight, but there is a complexity to the construction of the ballot, and if you go back to the last election, last general election, where we were roundly criticized, and I think in some respects rightfully so, for the 6-point font on the ballot. That was with 5 languages. So now if we added now a 6th language in, something has to give somewhere along the way. And I don't see us adding more languages without going to a second page, right? And that is it. But I will just say that will represent a big sea change from the way that elections have been conducted in this city, you know, since time immemorial. Everybody got used to the fact that you could walk into a voting machine and the old levers and everything was all in front of you. Now we've tried to transpose that into a piece of paper. There's some growing pains along the way. And I think ultimately, and I don't have the authority to to make a decision, but I think ultimately what that's going to lead to is an evolution of the voting system itself. And I hesitate to speak on where I think that would go, lest I be accused of trying to interfere in some type of procurement thing later on. What I'm saying is, this full-face ballot, right? We're kind of stuck at 22 inches, right? Inclusive of the stub with the stapling. So that leaves us basically with 19 inches of usable space.
But Mike, just kind of raise an idea.
Right.
You know, why can't we have ballots that are printed in 2 languages, and have extra ballots in the polling place where a voter can pick which language they want?
Well, because the more ballots you have and the more ballot styles you have, laying off to the side the additional paper cost,
Yes.
which is not insignificant.
Yes.
We averaged a little over $1.3 million in ballot costs, over the last 4 years. Some years as high as 1.6 million. Lay that off to the side as if it's insignificant, which I don't believe it is, but for the purposes of getting to a more technical point. Every one of those ballots has to be built.
Yep.
And so, I would suggest that the next time you guys go to vote, look at your ballots. Along the top and along the bottom and along the sides, there are a series of dashes. Those are called timing marks.
Yep.
All of those timing marks have to line up with an oval. So every time you change a ballot style, it's not simply taking somebody else's name out and plugging somebody else's name in. That ballot has to be built from scratch all over again, right? And then it has to be tested pursuant to the state certification requirements to make sure I could print the ballot up, right? But if it doesn't work, what good is it, right? So it has to be done according to the appropriate process. And so, the more ballot styles you have, the more you add to the paper, the more you add to the work. And we just had a conversation today, separate and apart from this but related. We have a problem. There is litigation going on right now with the governor's race. Now, what's the problem with that? It's a top of the ticket race, so it affects every ballot. We have to make a decision by no later, we wanted to make it by August the 11th, but we've given the commissioners, since our next stated meeting is the 12th, the commissioners are going to have to make a decision by August the 12th, whether or not the litigation is completed with respect to these court challenges, how we're going to print these ballots. Because we need to get them built and tested so that they're ready to go for September the 9th. So everything, there is no such thing as in the elections process as something occurring in a vacuum. Everything it's like DNA, right? I mean, it's all interconnected, and it ends up forming this big system. So we philosophically at the Board of Elections have no problem giving access to everyone, but then we have to weigh that against A, the available resources, and B, what can we reasonably accomplish and still pull off the election and get the vast majority of people served.
If I may, just a quick footnote to that, of course, very valid concerns, but first of all, our thinking about this, which sort of have not discussed in that much detail, but I've thought about how there can be some compromise between what was the vetoed law and the Russian community needs, given that there is a more or less known, more or less a clear number of people that would need or would want to have this ballot, or for whom having the Russian language on the ballot would actually motivate them to come and vote. We wonder whether there is a possibility to have a limited number of ballots that would be, well, as I write in my written list, would be available upon request. The people who, a limited number of the ballots where maybe one of those other languages would be placed with Russian so that it fits the same space, but it's available specifically for people who will ask for it in advance.
That's just the issue that Mike just
Right.
addressed. So.
And the ballot issue, let's leave that off to the side because there is a level of complexity. So maybe we can take some, victories where we can get them in the short term. And Ms. Vasquez just came up to me and told me that the the voter registration booklet that you refer to is available in Russian on our website, and if you give Valerie your information, she can make them available to you in bulk for distribution to whomever you wish to distribute them. So that's at least a start where we can get, you know, that information to you in the required language, and then, you know, the rest of the process is going to involve, you know, the state assembly and the state senate and the governor and a lot of other things that none of us here at this forum have control over.
Yeah, I understand.
You know.
I distributed already one of those as a volunteer for my community. I don't think, I mean, on my folks, yeah. The thing is that, of course, they don't have immediate, easy access to them unless they know. For example, our organization, which has no funding and has only temporary part-time once a week space, can find us out to get this booklet from us. But the main thing, the one issue is that there is a number of other things beside the ballot and beside the booklet that could be translated. And I think for most folks in the community who are concerned, it's not. They are not looking at having like everything to be translated at once, but they are coming to the election, to the Board of Elections, and they're seeing those stacks of Chinese and Korean registration forms, and there's no Russian, and now some of us have been going there, some matter of interest in calling, saying here is something that is so obvious that we don't have a voter registration in Russian for. Here where Russians live in the south.
I can just really.
Yeah, so
there's one other suggestion that I'd like to make.
But about the general sense of the court.
If Ms. Vasquez could have your information, what we have periodic meetings with, you know, the good government groups, the language groups. There's absolutely no reason why you should not be invited to those. And if you can't make it, somebody that can represent you can come when we're having our discussions with the other stakeholders in the process as well. You are certainly welcome to have a seat at the table as long as I'm, you know, the executive director and get to make these decisions. You can come and participate in the process, and I think it'll be informative for you, but also informative for us as well.
Thank you. We greatly appreciate it. Okay. Yes, I take that invitation. Absolutely.
Right. And Ms. Vasquez will get your information before we go.
Absolutely. Just one thing to carry back.
And while we are on this, not me specifically at my organization, but our community would greatly value being more involved with city government offices than it is now, because we know that we have no people representing our community in most of government offices. Not in the office of public advocate, not in any other place.
But please feel free to attend this meeting as the South Brooklyn and the Asian.
Right. And we meet several times a year. It's not like, you know, it's not one meeting a year. I mean, it's an ongoing process.
But I just want to say for the record, is that we all believe in enfranchisement of all voters, and that in the face, especially in the face of what's happening around the country, that we believe firmly that everyone should have the right to vote in a way that makes it easy for them to vote. And I think right now around this table you have 100% unanimity that we want to make this possible. So what you're hearing from us isn't that we disagree, we fully support what you're saying. We have to deal with the practicalities of trying to make this happen, and that's where it comes. So it's frustrating for all of us, but we completely hear you and support what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. As long as this discussion is moving to a good direction, as I feel it's great. The opportunity for all my people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate your participation.